Hello, my buddy. Welcome back to English with Luna. I'm really happy you're here today. Really, because if you pressed play on this episode, it probably means something very specific. It probably means you're tired of forgetting English words. And I get that. Before we start, just take a second. Wherever you are right now, maybe you're walking, maybe you're on the bus, maybe you're in your room with your headphones on. Just relax your shoulders a little bit. This is not a test. You're not being evaluated. You're just here to grow. And today we're going to talk about something that almost every English learner experiences, but doesn't always say out loud. You learn a word, you understand it, you even feel smart for a moment, and then 2 days later, it disappears. It's like your brain deletes it. And then you see the same word again and you think, wait, I've seen this before. And that feeling is frustrating, not because the word is difficult, but because you feel like you're not progressing, like you're running but staying in the same place. And the worst part is not forgetting the word. The worst part is the emotional reaction that comes after. You start questioning yourself. Why is this so hard for me? Why do other people remember? Maybe I'm just bad at languages. And slowly your confidence starts to shrink, not because you're incapable, but because your method is not aligned with how memory actually works. In this episode, we're not going to talk about memorizing long vocabulary lists. We're not going to talk about downloading 5 new apps. We're not going to talk about studying 3 hours per day. We're going to talk about something much simpler, much more realistic, and much more powerful: daily repetition and shadowing. But not in an extreme way, not in a stressful way, in a sustainable way, in a way that fits into real life. Because the goal is not to learn more words, the goal is to stop losing them. The goal is to build vocabulary that stays with you when you speak, vocabulary that comes naturally, without panic, without freezing, without translating every single second. So today, stay with me, listen actively, reflect a little bit, and maybe choose just one small idea from this episode that you can apply tomorrow. That's enough. You don't need to change everything. You just need to stop forgetting. Let's go deeper. There's something very quiet and very personal about forgetting words in a language you're trying so hard to learn. It's not dramatic, nobody else sees it, it doesn't look like failure from the outside, but inside it feels heavy. Because every time you forget a word you already studied, it feels like proof that maybe you're not moving forward, and that silent doubt accumulates over time. The real frustration is not that English is difficult. Most learners accept that it will take time. The real frustration is the repetition of the same cycle. You learn vocabulary, you feel productive, you even imagine yourself using those words in future conversations. For a brief moment, you feel closer to fluency. But then real life happens. A few days pass, you don't review properly, you hear the word again, and it feels vaguely familiar but not accessible. And when you try to use it while speaking, it simply doesn't come out. That moment, when your mind goes blank, creates a very specific kind of tension. It's not just linguistic, it's emotional. You start speaking more slowly, you hesitate, you replace the word with something simpler, or worse, you stop the sentence completely. And after the conversation ends, the word magically comes back to you. You remember it perfectly when it's too late. And that delayed recall makes everything more frustrating because it shows you that the word was somewhere in your brain, but not available when you needed it.
Over time, this creates a dangerous narrative. You begin to believe that your memory is weak, that maybe you're not naturally good at languages, that other people retain vocabulary more easily. You start comparing your progress to others online who seem to speak fluently after 1 year. And even if you know logically that social media shows highlights and not reality, emotionally it still affects you. What most learners don't realize is that forgetting is not a sign of incapability. It is a sign of incomplete integration. When you only see a word once or twice, your brain categorizes it as temporary information. It doesn't see it as survival level important. Your brain is efficient. It keeps what it uses and deletes what it doesn't. So when you study vocabulary but don't actively retrieve it, repeat it, hear it in context, and say it out loud multiple times across different days, your brain assumes it's optional. And here is where many people fall into the productivity trap. They think the solution is more. More words, more lists, more apps, more hours. But more exposure without structured repetition actually increases the problem. You keep feeding your brain new vocabulary without reinforcing the old one. So your mental storage becomes crowded but unstable. You recognize many words passively, but they don't belong to you actively. And that passive-active gap is what hurts your confidence the most, because when you listen, you understand. When you read, you understand. But when you speak, you feel smaller. You feel limited. You feel like your brain is slower than your understanding. And that gap creates insecurity, especially in conversations where you don't have time to think calmly. The emotional weight of this cycle is rarely discussed. People talk about grammar mistakes, pronunciation, accent, but they don't talk enough about the quiet discouragement of forgetting vocabulary repeatedly. It makes you question your consistency. It makes you doubt your discipline. It makes you feel like you are starting from zero again and again. And maybe the hardest part is that you are actually working hard. You are listening to podcasts like this one. You are trying to improve. You are investing time. So when the results don't feel stable, it creates confusion. You think, if I'm putting effort, why doesn't it stay? And that question can slowly drain motivation if you don't understand what's happening underneath. So if you feel stuck in that loop, learning, forgetting, relearning, I want you to know something very clearly. This is not a personal defect. It is a structural issue in how you are practicing. And the good news about structural issues is that they can be redesigned. You don't need a better memory. You need a better repetition rhythm. You don't need talent. You need integration. Because vocabulary is not stored through intensity, it is stored through frequency and retrieval. And if no one explained that to you before, it's not your fault that you're tired. We're going to fix that. But first, I needed you to understand that the frustration you feel is valid. It makes sense. And you're not behind. You're just practicing in a way that doesn't match how memory consolidates language. And that can change.
So if the problem is not your intelligence, not your discipline, and not your motivation, then what actually changes things? The answer is not dramatic. It's not a secret technique. It's not something viral. It's something quieter than that. It's structure, but not rigid structure, living structure, a rhythm that your brain can trust. Let me explain it in a simpler way. Imagine you learn the word hesitate. You understand it, you write it down, maybe you even translate it. In that moment, your brain recognizes it, but recognition is not ownership. Recognition is just awareness. Ownership happens when the word becomes accessible under pressure. And that only happens through retrieval. So the first part of the method is daily repetition, but not the way most people do it. I don't want you memorizing 30 new words per day. That's noise. I want you choosing 5 to 7 words maximum, words that are useful, words that you can imagine using in your real life, words that feel practical, not decorative. And instead of studying them once intensely, you touch them lightly every day.
Day 1, you learn the meaning and hear them in context. Day 2, you say them out loud in full sentences about your own life. Day 3, you listen to them again and repeat them without reading. Day 4, you try to remember them before checking your notes. Day 5, you use them spontaneously in a short spoken reflection. Notice what's happening here. You're not cramming, you're revisiting. You're creating multiple memory traces. Each time you return to the word, your brain says, "Oh, this again? Maybe this matters." And slowly it moves the word from temporary storage into long-term accessibility. But here's where the second part becomes powerful: shadowing. Shadowing is not repeating like a robot, it's borrowing rhythm. It's training your mouth and your brain to work together without overthinking. When you shadow, you listen to a sentence and repeat it almost immediately, trying to copy not only the pronunciation, but the flow, the speed, the pauses, the emotional tone. For example, if you hear, "I didn't hesitate because I knew it was the right decision," you don't analyze it, you don't translate it, you repeat it in rhythm, again and again and again. What shadowing does is fascinating. It reduces the gap between understanding and producing. It forces your brain to process language in real time without stopping to build the sentence from zero. It teaches you to trust patterns instead of constructing everything manually. And when you combine daily repetition with shadowing, something shifts. Instead of memorizing isolated vocabulary, you start absorbing chunks, real pieces of language, and chunks are easier to retrieve because they are stored as units, not as separate words floating in your head. So instead of remembering hesitate alone, you remember, "I didn't hesitate. I was hesitating because, don't hesitate to call me." Now the word has a home, it lives inside structures, and structures are stable. This method is not exciting at first. It feels simple, maybe even too simple, but simplicity is what allows consistency, and consistency is what builds fluency. Because fluency is not speed, fluency is familiarity. It's the feeling that you've been here before, that your brain recognizes the path, that your mouth has practiced this movement already. And when that familiarity increases, the panic decreases. You stop freezing not because you suddenly know thousands of new words, but because the words you do know are anchored deeply. That's the method. Small number of words, repeated across days, used in personal sentences, shadowed in real rhythm, retrieved without looking. Not intense, not dramatic, but powerful. And if you do this for 30 days, you won't just have learned vocabulary, you will have trained your brain to keep it.
Now, I want to talk to you in a very honest way, because everything we've said sounds structured, it sounds doable, and it is. But that doesn't mean it's always going to feel easy. There are going to be days when you don't feel like repeating anything, days when your brain feels slow, days when you listen to English and it sounds fast again, even if last week it felt clearer. Days when you try to speak and you still freeze. And when that happens, I don't want you to interpret it as failure. Language learning is not linear. It expands, contracts, stabilizes, and expands again. Sometimes you're improving in ways you can't even see yet. Your ear is adapting quietly. Your brain is organizing patterns in the background. And because you can't measure that instantly, you think nothing is happening. But something is happening. The problem is that we expect visible progress every week. We want proof. We want to feel smarter quickly. And when that sensation doesn't come, we assume the process isn't working. But real fluency is subtle. It grows quietly. And there's another truth that no one talks about enough. Sometimes forgetting is part of remembering. When you try to recall a word and you struggle for a few seconds before remembering it, that struggle is strengthening the memory. That slight discomfort is your brain reinforcing the pathway.
So even the moment that feels frustrating is actually productive. But emotionally, it doesn't feel productive. It feels annoying. It feels like, why is this still hard? And this is where many people quit, not because they can't learn, but because they misinterpret the discomfort. You have to normalize that English will sometimes feel messy in your mouth, that sentences won't come out perfect, that you'll mix tenses, that you'll forget a word you practiced yesterday, that your pronunciation won't sound the way you want yet. That's not a sign that you're incapable. That's a sign that you're in the process. And the process is not glamorous. It's repetitive, it's sometimes boring, it's sometimes invisible. But it works if you stay long enough. You don't need motivation every day. You need a minimum standard, even on bad days. Maybe on a good day, you repeat your words 10 times. On a low-energy day, you repeat them twice. That still counts. That still protects the habit. That still keeps the connection alive. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means continuity. And I want you to release something right now, the idea that confident speakers never forget words. They do. The difference is not memory, it's emotional reaction. When confident speakers forget a word, they paraphrase, they pause, they replace it, they move on. They don't collapse internally. They don't think, I'm terrible at this. They think, okay, what's another way to say it? That emotional stability is part of fluency. So as you practice repetition and shadowing, also practice self-compassion. Speak imperfectly, repeat awkwardly, sound robotic sometimes. That phase is temporary. It's training, it's muscle building. No one sounds elegant while building strength. And if 1 week feels slow, don't restart from zero emotionally. Don't dramatize it. Just continue. Language rewards those who stay, not those who rush. You are not behind. You are not slow. You are not bad at languages. You are building something invisible that will suddenly feel visible one day. And when that day comes, it won't feel like magic. It will feel like familiarity.
So before we finish today, I want you to pause for a second. Not to think about grammar, not to think about vocabulary lists, not to think about how far you still have to go. I want you to think about how far you've already come. Because if you're listening to this episode in English, even if you don't understand every single word, that already says something. A few years ago, maybe this would have sounded impossible. Maybe it would have sounded like noise. And now? Now it sounds challenging, but reachable. That's growth. Sometimes we ignore our own progress because it feels slow. But slow progress is still progress. Quiet progress is still progress. And what we talked about today, repetition, shadowing, staying consistent, it's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming familiar. It's about building a relationship with the language instead of fighting it. English is not something you conquer once and for all. It's something you spend time with, something you revisit, something you slowly feel more comfortable around. And confidence doesn't arrive when you know everything. Confidence arrives when you stop panicking about not knowing everything. So this week, don't try to transform your entire routine. Don't overwhelm yourself with new systems. Just choose 5 words. 5. Use them for several days, repeat them out loud, shadow a few sentences, let your brain adapt naturally. Small actions, repeated calmly, that's enough. And if one day you forget a word again, smile a little. It doesn't mean you're back at the beginning, it just means you're still building. Fluency is not a moment, it's a direction, and you're already walking in it. Thank you for spending these minutes with me. I know your time is valuable. I know your energy matters. And the fact that you're investing both into your English says more about you than you think. If this episode resonated with you, keep coming back. Keep listening, keep practicing in small ways.
Let this be something steady in your life, not something stressful. I'm proud of you for not quitting, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.